Right. While all of this diversity, inclusion, and environmental stuff is a hope for the future, we're about to bring onto the show a man who deals with the facts of the present and the immediate past. Neil Edwards is the CEO of market intelligence provider The Builders Conference, and he is about to walk us through the Construction Contract Awards for October 2021. So while I'm getting him on the show, let's roll his theme tune. Good morning, Neil, and sorry to keep you waiting in the green room for so long.
It's not a problem. Not a problem. Good morning to you.
There's rather too much going on in the industry at the moment. That's the problem.
I think there's rather too much going on in the whole world at the present moment in time.
So it does feel like that, doesn't it? Yeah. Now, I've just said that you've got your finger on the pulse of all things present and immediate past. So let's start as we always do. What were the scores on the doors for October 2021?
October 2021, the scores on the doors was £4.74 billion worth of new construction orders. So that is a little bit down from last month, which was in September was 7.5. The number of projects were 362 compared to 441 in September. And the number of companies securing new work in this month was 249 against 289 in September. So it's a little bit quieter this month, but that may be also to do with we have had some half terms and holiday periods in there. So there may be some readjustment next month when people return to work.
But I guess we're also at that point of the year where we're starting that inexorable slide into the festivities as well. I mean, October, November, December usually does show a bit of a downward curve anyway, doesn't it?
It does. We've definitely seen that on the number of tenders that are currently out there in the world. So people bidding for work, etc., has definitely taken a backward step over the last 2 to 3 weeks. So yes, it's predictable that this normally happens. We're above the £4.5 billion, which is sort of like well on average. So there's no real alarm out there, shall we say, because if you actually take the previous 9 months, we've obviously done very well in those 9 months because of the rolling year so far, as we speak now, is up at 85 billion. So we're a good 5% above what we would probably be looking at last year.
That's superb stuff. So the obvious question then is who were the big winners and who came out on top of the pile?
The big winner this month is Berkeley Group. So it's back to housing, and they have put forward or they are starting a £300 million job in Bermondsey, in Malt Place. It's for obviously their own units, and yeah, that's £380 million. So we haven't got one of those projects at the top that sometimes we see, which is over the £1 billion marks. It's definitely an accumulation this one, an aggregate total. So yeah, the largest and the most is 380 million, and in housing and in London. So we'll come to that later on in our region and sector wise. Second is JRL Group. Now they're or Reddingtons, and part of that is they've got a section called Midgard, and Midgard have picked up a couple of projects, one worth 160 million, the other worth 150 million. The 160 million is in Manchester. It's for over 500 flats, and the client is One Heritage, and the other project is in Brighton for 150 million, and the client for that is Moda Living, and that's in Sackville Road in Hove. So we are back again to housing stroke miscellaneous, because there is some office and local community facilities being involved on that one as well. Third on the list with 278 million is Cisc Group, and the largest one of their projects is a £210 million new science campus in the Midlands. It's Bristol Road, Harborne Lane, Aston Webb Boulevard. Yeah, it's the first phase of the Birmingham Health Innovation Campus will see a 7th floor laboratory and university for Birmingham University. So that's 210 million pounds there. And fourth on the list with 3 projects, the largest of which is going to be a project at Sheffield Hallam University. And this is called the Project Hallam Alliance Partnership. And this is a 220 million pound project. And bringing up the top 5 is Morgan Sindall, the largest one of their projects, which they picked up 9 this month. The largest one of their projects is phase 1 of a project at Canning Town for 355 residential units. And the client there is English Cities Fund. So they're the ones that are in 5th place this month. And if you look at, sorry, you come back.
I was going to say, how many of the how many actually top the 100 million mark? That's always a good indicator.
Yeah, towards the lower end, 12 businesses this month. Towards the lower end of what we've seen over the past 9 months. And the most number of projects is Kia Group, which is 16. And the largest of their project is a 15 million pound project. So it's quite this month they've got 72 million as an aggregate total. So if the largest is 15, you can obviously see that there's obviously a number of smaller projects rather than those marquee projects that you sometimes see within the bigger businesses.
We'll come to the various sectors in a second, and probably have quite a look at roads and housing as well. But we've had our usual monthly question. So let's go to the regions. How is Wales looking? And I think I already have an idea that London is top dog yet again. But
I never like this because I never like to disappoint. But the whole of Wales as an accumulative total is just 60 million pounds, which is obviously considerably down. So we're not seeing them in the top echelons of which region is this month. But yeah, London this month is 1.6 billion pounds, and because of the project I was speaking about, obviously in Yorkshire for the Hallam, that's 532, and the Midlands is something like just over 550 million. So those are the top 3 regions this month.
We've also had a question, how's Scotland doing?
Yeah, Scotland is 121.5 million pounds this month. So it's a little bit down from last month, but it's still carrying on. I don't know whether they've also taken, because obviously COP26 is closed down Glasgow for the last 2 weeks and for the next 2 weeks. So it's kind of going to be a month on hold up there, where nobody's allowed in or out other than the delegates and the almighty from many different countries. So I don't know whether Scotland's going to be taking a bit of a breath over the next 6 weeks.
Taking a bit of a breather in terms of construction, but I would imagine its hospitality industry is doing really quite nicely right about now.
I think it might be, yeah. Allegedly.
Sectors. I've already touched on a few bits, and I've got some specific questions. How are we looking sector-wise? I will save you the disappointment, and I'm just going to take a wild stab that housing is top dog again.
Yeah, housing is top dog at 2.2 billion pounds this month, and miscellaneous, which is 500 million as well. So between the two, 2.7 is over half of this month's total. The other places, obviously, with those campuses under the education part, that's up at 700 million as well. The rest of the sectors are very quiet comparatively to what we've seen in the last 9 months.
That's interesting. Now, there was a couple of sectors that I really wanted to focus on. I guess let's start with roads, shall we? Report on Construction Inquirer just this morning. MPs are calling for a 5-year pause on the smart motorway programme, and they're talking safety concerns and what have you. It strikes me that whenever the industry is flying high and lots of workload and what have you, somebody somewhere along the line will come along and shoot us squarely in the foot, and this looks like that could be just such an example, doesn't it?
It does, and it's a bit disappointing to read such a thing, really. And it may be a little bit of a PR exercise that's coming out from the top, because we are in this COP26 period of time, and travel on roads is going to be using fossil fuels. So I don't know, but there was a report out that the number of accidents that are occurring on smart motorways is increasing, and there was talk about the fact that because obviously we are looking to go towards, I think it's 2025, electric vehicles, their roll off and ability is significantly less than a diesel and petrol car, and the safe areas on smart motorways do not actually combine with the with what electric cars can actually do. So I think there may be something in that as well, but until the full facts are out there, we need to have a look. But yeah, I think it looks like there's going to be a moratorium on smart motorways for the next 5 years.
It's a strange analogy to draw this idea of electric cars, because they do stop immediately. You know, once the battery's dead, they stop. That's the way they work. But surely, and as I say, I'm going to draw an analogy here. Surely, if we are going to transfer to electric vehicles, we need to amend our driving procedures. You know, I know people that run electric cars and Teslas and that kind of thing, and they plan their routes accordingly. They charge accordingly and that kind of thing. And the reason I've said the word analogy, I was watching, you know, COP26 coverage, and they were talking about, you know, rivers being chock full of, or rivers and oceans actually being chock full of plastic bottles, and that apparently is the fault of the likes of Coca-Cola. You and I are both fishermen to varying degrees of success. You know, I was brought up not to throw plastic bottles and tin cans and empty sandwich wrappers into the river. Surely that's the starting point. And surely with something like smart motorways, you know, we need to improve the nation's infrastructure. Surely the starting point shouldn't be let's stop building the damn things. It should be teaching people to drive their new electric vehicles properly.
Exactly. I think somebody once said, and I can't remember who it was, people know their rights, but they don't know their responsibilities. And we do need to understand that the responsibility is ours if we are going to go on a 300-mile journey or 400-mile journey. We've got to plan that in the future. It's not just a case of getting in your car and just driving. Things have got to change if we want to save and reduce the amount of carbon emissions we're doing. So yeah, we have got to take more responsibility. And as you said, likewise, when I went fishing when I was younger, I was given a bag to put all my rubbish in, including any fishing line or whatever, and my sandwiches and whatever, sandwich tin foil or whatever, plastic. And when I came home, I put it in the bin. Okay, I'm of a vintage that we didn't have to separate between the bins then, but I'd just come straight home and put it in the bin. So we have to teach people, and probably that has to be put within the highway code. And become mandatory within any type of driving test in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Nick Drew has just agreed with what we're saying there. Yeah, human responsibility and what have you. The other bit of the story that's come out over the past few days, and again COP26 related, is obviously lots of talk about net zero and carbon emissions, and this suggestion that becoming carbon free should be a prerequisite to planning. To my mind, planning is already the biggest stumbling block in the house building process. Surely an additional hoop will make it even harder to hit the targets that the industry has been consistently missing for at least the last 30 years.
Yeah, it worries me when something like that comes out, because I go on about it on a regular basis to exhibitions that I attend, etc. Our planning system is it's not completely broken, but it is near enough broken. Left and right hand don't know what they're doing once again. And then you're going to put another level in this to say about carbon. Who's going to have overall charge of that? There needs to be a single regulatory body if you're going to be doing that. But then you get into all types of procedures and then red tape, etc., etc. It is a little bit worrying in that statement, and I believe that as a construction industry, we are trying very hard. We can do a lot better. But we try very, very, very hard to actually achieve the greatest amount of recycling, especially the demolition side, the amount of how we look at our waste, and we've got the amount of skips on site. We look at how we put our materials in there, and also Peter was earlier on this morning, talking about green plants. We really are trying to push the boundaries, and now you're going to put another barrier in our way.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that struck me about that is this idea. Obviously, we already have a system of weighting when we're bidding for work, so obviously competence and safety and all that sort of thing. What will be the weighting on that sort of thing where you've got a town that is desperate for new housing because you've got homeless people or you've got an overspill or whatever it might be? How do you balance that against this need for net zero? And I realise both are vital considerations, but if you get to the point where a planning officer or a planning department says, no, it's not carbon efficient enough, therefore we're not going to build that 100 houses, that's just making a bigger problem further down the line, isn't it?
It is, and it will just accumulate as it goes through. I do understand that there'll be somebody also stating the fact that developers are making extraordinary amounts of money, and they should reduce the amount of profitability. But there's a lot of risk when you're doing some projects, and when you look at risk and reward in construction compared to other industries, we really are at the bottom of the table, and the rewards that we get are not as good as some other areas. So it's a very difficult political and economical issue to overcome, and it needs all of us to actually push it forward, we must become more carbon neutral because we know what the facts are. It's quite stark out there, but we still need to live somewhere, and we've got to combine the two.
Absolutely. I don't think there's any doubt that we're in the midst of a post-pandemic boom. I know this month's figures were a little bit down on last month, but the monthly figures haven't dropped below the £4 billion benchmark for what feels like about 2 or 3 years now. There's lots of work about, and as you've just reported, 4.7 billion during the month of October when we had the half-term holidays. And yet, in the past few weeks, we've seen a couple of very high-profile company insolvencies. How much of that do you think stems from the ending of government financial support that was put in place during the pandemic? And more importantly, I guess, do you think we're likely to see more companies going under as a result?
Yes and yes. What definitely did help the industry through quite a very difficult time in everybody's lives was obviously the furlough scheme. And those companies are now, obviously, at the end of September, that came to a close, and the support was removed. But what has happened is like we said last month, we probably, as an industry, if we want to be really critical, have not fixed the roof while the sun was shining. And we need to look at how we do things, and we very much kept ourselves doing the same old, because we thought that was the way to do it. And I also spoke about a little bit earlier on about the risk and rewarded within construction. We really do work on if it's a bid if you're in a bid situation, the amount of money that those contractors make on projects is eye-wateringly low sometimes. So if there is any uplift in materials, in labour, in shortages, etc., of HGV lorries, etc., drivers, etc., that has a huge effect on those overall profit margins. So yeah, I think there may be, and this is only anecdotally, I think there will be some further casualties. And okay, we're talking about the larger businesses here because they make the headlines, but it's those businesses that are £10 million that will not make them headlines, and there'll be a few of those as well because we haven't invested. I think Peter was talking about there, I did write it down somewhere, about investing in technology as well to understand what we actually do it ourselves. And we haven't done that either because we kind of just carried on this same Scalextric track because that's the way we thought and that's the way we believe is the best way to make money, and probably it isn't. We had to diversify.
Yeah, what's that? The increase in cement will hit the industry hard. I was going to come on
It
to
will.
that.
It
I was
will.
going to come on to that in a second, because I wrote a piece earlier in the week that's, and it's my personal take, is that the things like the C-bills and the grant funding that the government put in place during the pandemic, which was obviously very welcome, but I wonder if that actually covered up a deeper malaise within some companies. You know, it allowed them to carry on for 18 months, 2 years, perhaps longer than they might have done, and now that prop has been taken away. All of a sudden, we've got companies tipping over. But as Gary has rightly said, you know, what are we talking about? 16% as the next rise by the end of the year, which will be a 30% year-on-year rise.
Yeah.
I mean, that and cement it's unavoidable, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an integral part of our industry, and you know, at one point we were actually a lot of builders merchants were actually limiting cement supplies to companies. Now, so that's not an increase in the cost; it was just limiting it. But that then obviously adds time to projects, which, if the client is not receptive to extensions of time, will have a detrimental impact on the profitability of that site as well. So we could be ending up that the claims surveyor, that was the dreaded sort of like 80s and 90s, is going to be coming back into the world, because he'll be trying to say, well, you know, there's exceptional circumstances here. There was COVID and all of that, and you're still going to invoke your contractual clauses because I'm 3 months late. You know, the industry is at a very we're very busy, but we're also got to make sure that we're doing things right, so we can actually be busy in 18 months' time, or be around in 18 months' time. It's a difficult one.
One of the other things that struck me, and again, I keep referring back to COP26 purely because it is in the headlines, is it's highlighted another disconnect. You and I spoke quite some time ago about at the time it was the impending demolition of all the power stations in the UK, or the fossil fuels, the oil and the gas and the coal-fired power stations that were coming to an end, and we hadn't, as a nation, actually put in place a strategy to replace them. There was talk about nuclear, but it was going to take us 10 years to demolish the fossil fuel ones and 20 years to rebuild the replacement. I've got a horrible feeling, particularly with cement, that we're talking ourselves into exactly the same situation. You know, we know that the cement industry is a major producer of gas emissions. We know that. We know we've got a price problem. We also know that there is a need to replace that as a material, but we're not there yet.
No.
And I think, you know, with price rises, you know, it would be lovely to see, you know, somebody said, oh, the price of cement has gone up by 30%, but don't worry, I've got this material I've made from spare mushrooms or whatever it might be. I don't know where the hell that came from, but you know, we don't have that, do we?
No, we don't have an alternative, and we're going to be we're going down this road. You and I did speak about those power stations. That it's going to take 20 years to build the new power stations to accommodate for the loss of power that we were going to, obviously, for demolishing the fossil fuels. And it also went to the erection of wind turbines and things like that. We were very slow in getting that off. And at one stage, I think we were so far behind the curve, it was stupid. And the same could be seen with cement as well. I haven't seen an alternative yet. Steel work is still extremely expensive, and obviously fossil fuels in that as well when actually manufacturing steel. So we could be. There's such good and positive things, but we must be saying to ourselves, okay, it's very good out there at the moment regarding the amount of projects, but let's fix some of these things at the same time. And let's try and do alternatives, do a little bit of development in certain areas to try and improve things.
And I guess the other thing with the cement thing, much the same as we had with material shortages that we've had over the past few months, is that you get the impression that the major projects like the HS2s will hold sway. You know, if HS2 stamp their feet, they will find cement, and you know, the local builder. I know the Federation of Master Builders has had a lot to say about that. The local builder of old will just have to wait his turn and have to pay through the nose accordingly.
Yeah, there is some element now because we're coming into the winter months as well. So the likes of because during the summer, what we did see it was or spring and summer was a significant increase in people doing projects on their houses, whether it be gardens or alterations within the houses because they weren't going on holiday. Now we're coming to a winter period, and plus the fact that the borders are now open, that has reduced the pressure on some elements of that. So there is a little bit of joy in that neck of the woods. But it's not going to be long before we're bound to March next year, and it'll all just start again. The external works and landscaping projects and little extension on houses, etc., will also just put more pressure on some materials. I'd love to have a crystal ball and see what was going to happen in the future regarding cement, really.
To a degree, you do have a crystal ball, though, don't you? Because the work that is being let now is basically the work that will start early in the new year.
Yeah.
And certainly based on the last 2 months, what are we averaging out around 5 and a bit billion? So the industry should be starting with its tail up early in the new year, shouldn't it?
Oh, definitely, it will be starting with its tail up, and we are seeing a significant number of people moving jobs as well, because staff levels have been, and I know we've taken away from the furlough scheme, but maybe that furlough scheme did underpin some businesses, but also other businesses looked at their staff in a different way to what they had been, and streamlined certain things. And so there is definitely a lot of staff movement. So next year, yeah, I think will be a good year for everybody, and I hope it continues. One thing you spoke about, and I want to come back to actually, is in connection with when companies bid for certain projects, the weighting system or the rating system. It shouldn't always be done on lowest price. It should be done on best value. One of the things that we've been looking at is the fact that how in the community you're weighted, because there's obviously a community element to it, but that doesn't account. There is no extra added value to your bid if your company goes out of its way and goes to local schools and colleges and say, come and join the industry, and come and do those sort of things. So we've got to look at lots of different things, but one of those things that I will highlight is the fact that we're lacking in apprenticeships or apprentices coming through, and if we don't weight that higher within our bid process, we weight the number of apprentices that are coming in, but we don't go out and sort of like the supply chain before that in schools and colleges. So we've got that should be put quite high in the list. Diversity has a greater percentage in your which is it has a greater percentage than actual apprenticeships and apprentices. So we've got to look at how we balance that kind of thing going forward, and that's a difficult one to work, but that's one thing we need to do. And if we're putting in carbon as well, it's
I think that's one of the challenges we have in the modern world. There are so many worthy causes, like gender diversity, like racial diversity, like the environment, and it seems like we're going to pursue that one, and then we're going to do that one, and it shouldn't be an either or. It should be everything should be coming together, shouldn't it?
Exactly right, because if we are going for carbon and all of those sort of things, you're dead right. If we haven't got the people to do the work, then but we also need buildings. So you can't stop buildings going on in the planning side of things, etc., because we need buildings to go on. So people and developers and professors and technicians and everything else can go to those buildings and work out a better element or a better material than cement. So it's a complete circle, all of this. You just can't pick one, as you quite rightly say.
I'm going to come back to a very important point that Gary Muirhead made earlier on. Mick Norton, why not place a greater emphasis on eco-friendly timber buildings as per Norway, as in Norway, where virtually no tree can be felled without a commitment to plant a new one? We've become too reliant on steel structures. Two things I would say to that. Yes, we have become too reliant on steel structures. And second is, if the world just basically looked to Norway on pretty much everything, including their minimum wage approach and that kind of thing, the world would be a better place.
Totally agree. 100% agree. If you could actually say a lot of the Scandinavian elements within this world, if we took half of what they did, the world would be a better place. And you're dead right. Why don't we look at, we can't say that we'll be cold if we have a timber frame building, because Norway is one of, and so, a lot of the arguments are broken when they say, oh yeah, but we always, we'll be cold in our housing, etc. No, Norway, and what do they go down to? Minus 10, 20 or whatever on a regular basis. We have to learn from these people rather than saying, no, I know what's best, and go on that same Scalextric track once again, round and round and round.
And the bizarre thing is that the Norwegians, and I'm going to demonstrate how badly I pronounce Norwegian. The Norwegians have got an approach that they refer to, and I'm going to take a stab at this. They refer to it as hugva, which is HYGVE, I think it is, and that basically means to be cozy. So whereas here in the UK, it gets to February, and we just basically crank the heating up to max. Our houses are glowing in the dark, but we're sat there in t-shirts. The Norwegians, they put on a big jumper, they grab a big cup of hot chocolate, and they bask in the fact that it's cold out there, but I'm cozy in here. We've got a long way to go to learn that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's disappointing that we don't. We're kind of arrogant sometimes to think that we do it better. We don't. Everybody should be. Everything is different, and if they timber framed with insulation, with proper designs, they are definitely better than a brick and a block building in some instances in the UK.
Dead right. Now, I'm going to go back to Gary's question because I think it is a very, very important one. We're talking about another 16% on the price of cement, which, as I've already said, is going to be a 30% year-on-year rise. And then come April, the price of fuel for our plant and equipment is going to go through the bloody roof because the red diesel tax exemption is going away. Obviously touched on HVO fuels, which I guess if you're Sunbelt Rentals, you can probably snap your fingers and get HVO. I don't think that's the case for everybody, and there will certainly be regions of the country. But we are looking at, one of our major materials, probably our key material, is going to take a hike in price, and the very lifeblood of the industry, diesel, or at least as it stands at the moment, is going to take a price hike in April as well. That it's all screaming inflation and future problems, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Well, yesterday the RAC came out with a report that normal diesel is at just over £1.48 per litre, which is the highest ever in the UK. So we're just all of these elements will have to filter through to the construction of work. I don't know how much lobbying behind the scenes is going on to say, can we have a 6 month or a 12-month hiatus on this removal of the tax, red diesel tax. But it's going to provide or going to produce a lot of heartache in a lot of businesses, especially the likes of ground workers, demolition contractors and people like that in the next, from April onwards.
Yeah, and I guess, I know the Mineral Producers Association, MPA, had written to Rishi Sunak. You would have thought that if there were going to be a delay, that would have been part of his autumn spending review. What was that, last week? And there was no mention of it as far as I could see. So I've got a horrible feeling that the rug is going to be pulled out from under us.
Yeah, they very much kind of have done everything to say industry and companies are going to take the largest burden of what we're going forward with. And that's what they're trying to do. And it's not my problem, it's yours.
Good morning, Howard. Good to see you here. NFTC and others have been lobbying hard with government, but we're told the rebate will be. We are told that the rebate will be removed. Yeah, that's exactly the way I'm reading it. I would like nothing more than to be able to come on here and announce the fact that they had second thoughts, but I don't think that's going to be happening. I do get it. I do get the overall argument, particularly when you think the amount that the nation has spent from the public coffers, as we've already said, propping up business and that kind of thing over the past 2 years. I do understand the need to replenish the national coffers, but it always seems oddly. I can't remember what the figure is, and I'm sure you can remind me. This figure of the amount that you invest in for every pound you put into construction, you get X number back.
£1.64. £1.64.
£1.64, and yet, the government seems intent on reining construction back, be it environmentally or cost-wise or whatever it might be. At every turn, it just seems like a completely false economy.
Well, and it doesn't join up with their statement that was in the autumn statement, because they were very, very keen to say we're going to be doing this infrastructure, this infrastructure, this infrastructure, this infrastructure, and we're going to be building this amount of hospitals, etc., etc., etc. Wow, so we're going to do all of that, but we're going to have this raging inflation.
Yeah, there's another comment from Howard there, pushing for a small rebate on green DHVO. Yeah, quite right too. But again, as I've already alluded to, I'm not entirely sure what the availability of that is. But I am going to let you get back to the day job in a second, Neil. But you're absolutely right. There is that disconnect. This idea of build back better. But when you're building back better, you've got to do it with both hands tied behind your back, without enough people to do the work, without enough materials, with escalating costs. And you've got to abide by a new set of planning rules as well.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult, isn't it? It's going to be very difficult, and we've only got a few months to get this sorted out, really, because if these tenders come out, which what we near 2020 we had the general election, didn't we? Yeah. So and if they're going to do a fixed term, which is 5 years, they're going to have to start to get a lot of these 46 hospitals not on the plans, but actually out there to bid, and so they can actually say we've got diggers in the ground on these 46 hospitals, because that's got to happen, and then you've got all this other infrastructure. So my head will explode if I'm not careful thinking about.
Well, I mean, as I often say on this show, the one good thing about all of this, all these highs and lows and ups and downs, it always gives us something to talk about, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, and that's why it's such a fascinating industry to be in, and that's why we need to bring more and more people into it. It's so fascinating. What does it produce? Something like between 8 and 12% of GDP, which is a huge amount, a huge amount to the UK economy. But it's also got its own intricacies and its idiots. It's fascinating if you actually unpick it. And when somebody says, "No, that can't be quite correct,"
yeah,
it probably is.
And the other thing as well, which I will touch upon, because you have mentioned apprenticeships. When you look at all the changes that are going on, the switch to green, the switch to technology, the switch to solar power and HVO, who does that play to better than it plays to anybody else? Young people. The very people that we are basically creating an industry that is as accommodating to young people as it could possibly be. We just need to deliver that message.
And what we need to do is, like, you can get when you go to university, you obviously get a student loan now, and you get it at great rates, and don't have to pay it off until a certain time. That same way of doing student loans to go to university should also be in place, so you can be an apprentice, because not everybody is academically, well, not everybody is an academic or wants to do academia. So do the same with apprenticeship. So if you can actually give a student loan or an apprenticeship loan on the same basis, that may help as well.
Yeah, dead right. And on that subject of academia and what have you, that book came out this week.
Yes.
I don't normally have props, but I've got props. That book came out this week, and the guy that wrote it, Paul Ford, works for Deconstruct here in the UK. Bit of an expert on making safe and demolishing dangerous structures, and he's dyslexic. Not only is he the managing director of a multi-million-pound company, an expert in his field, he's now an author as well. You know, this industry does not require you to be Stephen Hawking or Steve Jobs. You know, so long as you've got a fairly decent helping of common sense, you can go a damn long way, can't you?
Well, I'm here.
I wasn't pointing fingers, but you know.
Some people might say I haven't got any common sense whatsoever. But yeah, you're dead right. You know, it's you can make this industry what you want, and if you are driven, it does have its good days and it does have its bad days. And you know, when the sun is shining, more often than not, they're good days. But when it's cold, wet, and windy, yeah, some people might, but it still might have a good day even on those days. So I would always tell young people to explore the opportunities within the construction industry, because it doesn't have to be on site. It can be in the office. You can be a quantity surveyor. It can be a project manager. It can be whoever. I would always recommend young people explore construction as a worthwhile trade to be.
I'm going to cut that little piece out of the show, and I want to run that on social media later on. And there you go, Nick Drew, a prime example of that. You know, up by his own bootstraps, digger driver. He's now probably the second most respected industry journalist. Second, I say. Truth be told, he's probably the first, actually. You know, and you know, he's a digger driver made good. And that is what that industry has allowed him to do. Obviously, you know, Nick has put in 30 plus years of bloody hard work and graft and everything else. But isn't he enjoying the rewards now, you know?
Exactly. And that is exactly it. If you work hard, the rewards are there.
No, totally. I'm just being called for breakfast, which means that we've definitely been going on I've been talking for more than an hour. I can't believe that. There's I didn't know that Albert Einstein was dyslexic.
Why nor did I? Oh, no. Thank you, Mick.
Maybe that's why when he wrote E equals MC squared, he was probably just writing his shopping list.
Every day is a learning day. So
absolutely. I'm going to get in trouble with the dyslexic community now. I do apologise. It just came into my head. I do apologise. Neil, I'm going to let you get back to the day job. I really appreciate you being here, as always. As I say, the recording of this will be up later on today, and I am going to cut that snippet out because I do think that's a fantastic thing to share. I'll see you again. Well, I'll speak to you before, but I'll see you again this time next month, I would imagine.
Good to see you.
All the best, Neil.